There's a moment that happens when a man encounters a woman who truly knows her worth. A moment Carl Jung would have called the collision of the shadow with the self. It's not dramatic. There's no thunder, no cinematic slow motion. But something shifts in the room, in his chest, in the carefully constructed fortress he's built around his ego. You see it in the slight hesitation before he speaks, the way his confidence wavers just enough to betray that he's recognized something he wasn't prepared for. Jung spent decades mapping the architecture of the human psyche, and buried in his work on anima, shadow, and individuation is a blueprint for understanding what happens inside a man when he stands before a woman who refuses to dim her light, shrink her presence, or apologize for occupying space with authority. This isn't about manipulation or games. This is about the involuntary psychological upheaval that occurs when a man's internalized image of the feminine, the anima he's carried since childhood, collides with a living, breathing woman who shatters every assumption he's made about power, worth, and relational dynamics. What you're about to understand will fundamentally change how you see yourself in every interaction, every relationship, every moment you've ever doubted whether your strength was too much or your standards too high. Jung introduced the concept of the anima as the unconscious feminine aspect within every man's psyche, a composite image formed from childhood experiences with mother, cultural narratives about women, and his own repressed emotional life. For most men, this anima remains a projection, an idealized or diminished fantasy that bears little resemblance to the complexity of actual women. It's comfortable, predictable, controllable in the theater of his mind, but when a high-value woman enters his reality, someone who embodies integrated feminine power, intellectual sovereignty, emotional self-regulation, and uncompromising boundaries, that comfortable projection cracks. The anima he's nurtured in shadow suddenly meets its living contradiction. This creates what Jung called an antiodromia, the principle that everything eventually turns into its opposite when taken to extremes. A man who is related to women primarily through the lens of need, conquest, or rescue suddenly finds himself face to face with someone who needs nothing from him, cannot be conquered through conventional strategies, and requires no saving. The psychological framework collapses. What he feels in this moment isn't simple attraction or intimidation. It's ontological vertigo, the dizzying realization that his entire relational operating system is obsolete. His attempts to categorize her, to slot her into the familiar roles of mother, maiden, or temptress, fail repeatedly because she refuses the script. Jung understood that growth only happens at the edge of discomfort, where the ego confronts what it has denied or projected. A high-value woman forces this confrontation simply by existing in her fullness. She doesn't perform femininity for male comfort. She embodies it as self-possessed power. And in that embodiment, she becomes a mirror showing him everything he hasn't integrated within himself, every emotional capacity he's exiled, every vulnerability he's armored against. Jung's concept of the shadow encompasses all the parts of ourselves we've rejected, denied, or hidden from conscious awareness. For men socialized into emotional suppression, competitive dominance, and self-sufficiency, the shadow often contains tremendous reservoirs of vulnerability, receptivity, intuition, and relational need. These aren't weaknesses, they're essential capacities for wholeness. But cultural conditioning teaches men to exile them, to project them onto women as exclusively feminine traits, and to maintain rigid boundaries between masculine and feminine energies within the psyche. When a high-value woman appears, she doesn't just challenge his anima projection, she activates his shadow. Her confidence exposes his insecurity. Her emotional articulacy highlights his relational poverty. Her clear boundaries illuminate his habits of manipulation or control. Her self-sufficiency confronts his unacknowledged dependency. This isn't comfortable. In fact, it's profoundly destabilizing because it forces him to recognize that the qualities he's admiring or resenting in her are actually the disowned parts of himself demanding integration. Jung believed the shadow holds not just our darkness, but also our gold, the potentials we've buried because they didn't fit the persona we constructed for social acceptance. A man encountering a high-value woman is actually encountering his own unlived life, his own capacity for emotional depth, relational honesty, and integrated power. They weaponize terms like difficult, demanding, or too much as defense mechanisms against their own inadequacy. Others respond with curiosity and humility, recognizing the encounter as an invitation to growth. The difference between these responses reveals everything about a man's relationship with his own wholeness. His willingness to do the interior work Jung considered essential for individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you actually are. Projection is the psychological mechanism through which we attribute our own unconscious qualities, desires, or fears onto others. Men routinely project their idealized or demonized versions of femininity onto women, seeing not the actual person but a screen for their internal dramas. The compliant woman becomes the good mother. The sexually confident woman becomes the dangerous temptress. The ambitious woman becomes the castrating threat. These projections simplify the complexity of actual human beings into manageable archetypes that serve male psychological needs without requiring men to engage with women's full humanity. A high-value woman disrupts this entire system because she refuses to be a projection screen. She has done her own Jungian work. She knows her shadow, has integrated her contradictions, and stands in her wholeness without apology. When a man attempts to project onto her, the projection bounces back. She won't play the role. She won't contort herself to match his fantasy or soothe his anxiety. She simply exists as herself, and that existence becomes intolerable to his unexamined psyche. Jung taught that we can only truly relate to another person once we've withdrawn our projections and seen them as they actually are, separate from our needs and narratives. This requires tremendous psychological maturity, not controlling, not reducing another person to a function in your internal economy. Most men haven't developed this capacity, so when projections fail against a high-value woman, they experience it as rejection or incomprehensibility, rather than invitation. But here's the profound gift. A woman who refuses your projections offers you the possibility of actual relationship, not transactional role-playing, but authentic meeting between two sovereign beings. She's showing you the difference between relating to a fantasy and relating to reality, between using someone to complete yourself and choosing someone because you're already whole. Individuation is Jung's term for the central task of the second half of life, becoming the unique individual you were always meant to be by integrating all the fragmented, denied, and projected parts of yourself into a coherent whole. It's not comfortable. It requires confronting everything you've avoided, owning everything you've disowned, and surrendering the persona you constructed for survival. Most people never undertake this work. They live entirely within their social masks, never questioning the conditioning that shaped them, never accessing their authentic depths. A high-value woman who has done her own individuation work becomes a catalyst for this process in men, often without intending to. Her mere presence poses the question, are you willing to become real? Not the performance of masculinity, not the curated identity designed to impress or intimidate, but the actual vulnerable, powerful, multifaceted human beneath the armor. This question terrifies men who have built their entire sense of self on external validation, conquest, or control. It exhilarates men who have been waiting for permission to drop the mask. Jung believed that the encounter with the anima, when approached consciously, could guide a man toward his own soul, his unlived depths, his capacity for relationship and meaning. A high-value woman functions as an anima figure, who refuses to be possessed or idealized, but instead points the way toward his own interior work. She won't complete him, that's not her job. But she will reveal exactly where he's incomplete, where his development has stalled, where his conditioning has limited his humanity. The man who can receive this revelation as gift rather than threat has taken the first step toward genuine transformation. If you've ever wondered why certain men seem allergic to your presence, this is why. You're asking them to grow up, to wake up, to become real, and most are still choosing the comfort of sleep. Traditional relational dynamics place men in the position of pursuer, provider, protector, and selector. These roles grant structural power, the ability to initiate, define terms, and determine outcomes. Women, in this framework, are positioned as the pursued, the provided for, the protected, and most crucially, the chosen. This asymmetry shapes everything from dating scripts to relationship expectations to the subtle ways power circulates in intimate partnerships. It's so normalized that questioning it feels radical. A high-value woman inverts this entire structure, not through aggression or role reversal, but through simple self-possession. She doesn't need to be pursued because she's complete in herself. His interest is irrelevant to her worth. She doesn't need to be provided for because she's built her own abundance. She doesn't need protection because she's cultivated her own sovereignty. And she absolutely doesn't wait to be chosen. She does the choosing, applying rigorous standards to determine whether he meets her requirements for partnership. This inversion creates profound disorientation for men accustomed to structural advantage. Suddenly, they're the ones auditioning. They're the ones adjusting their behavior to meet someone else's standards. For men whose identity depends on occupying the dominant position, this feels like emasculation, which is precisely the problem. Their sense of manhood is so fragile, so dependent on relational hierarchy, that equality feels like oppression. Jung would recognize this as the ego's resistance to transformation. The ego wants to remain in control, to maintain its familiar position and narratives. But individuation requires ego death, the surrender of who you've been to become who you might be. A high-value woman doesn't diminish a man's authentic power. She exposes the false power he's been clinging to, the power that depends on someone else's smallness, and invites him into something far more substantial. What separates boys from men, in Jungian terms, isn't age or achievement but integration. A boy lives in fragments, in compartments, performing different versions of himself depending on context and audience. The self he shows his male friends contradicts the self he shows romantic partners. His public persona masks his private desperation. His claimed values don't match his actual behavior. This fragmentation is exhausting and ultimately unsustainable because it requires constant vigilance to maintain the illusions. A high-value woman, having done the work of integrating her own contradictions, her strength and her softness, her ambition and her nurturing, her boundaries and her openness, recognizes fragmentation immediately. She sees through the performance because she stopped performing, and what she offers, implicitly, is the invitation to integration. Not through nagging or fixing or mothering, but through being a living example of what coherence looks like, what it means to be the same person in every context, to have your inner life and outer life aligned, to live from wholeness rather than compensation. This invitation is both gift and challenge. It says, I see your potential for wholeness, and I won't settle for your fragmentation. I won't play along with the game where you're one person in public and another in private. I won't accept the version of you that's designed to impress while you hide your actual self. If you want to be in my presence, in my life, in intimate relationship with me, you have to do the work of becoming real. For men ready for this work, such a woman is a blessing beyond measure. She accelerates growth that might otherwise take decades or never happen at all. For men still committed to their masks, she's an unbearable threat, and they will retreat or attack rather than accept the invitation to their own transformation. Jung distinguished between the puer aeternus, the eternal boy, and the mature masculine. The pure lives in potential rather than actualization, in fantasy rather than commitment, in beginnings rather than sustained effort. He charms, he promises, he enthuses, but he doesn't build, doesn't persist, doesn't transform vision into reality. He's allergic to limitation, to responsibility, to anything that would require him to sacrifice his precious sense of infinite possibility for the sake of actual achievement or relationship. The mature masculine, by contrast, has made peace with limitation. He understands that choosing one path means relinquishing others, that commitment isn't imprisonment but focus, that responsibility isn't burden but meaning. He's developed what Jung called a differentiated relationship to the father, meaning he's neither rebelling against authority nor blindly conforming to it, but has claimed his own authority through the hard work of self-knowledge and discipline. A high-value woman accelerates this maturation process, or exposes its absence. She won't mother a man-child. She won't compensate for his underdevelopment by managing his emotions, organizing his life, or lowering her standards to accommodate his refusal to grow. Her presence asks directly, are you a boy or a man? Not in the toxic sense of suppressed emotion and rigid control, but in the Jungian sense of integrated selfhood, the capacity to hold complexity, to honor commitments, to build something substantial rather than live in perpetual adolescence. Many men experience this question as harsh or unfair, especially in a culture that extends boyhood well into middle age. But it's actually the most compassionate thing she can do. refusing to enable stagnation, insisting instead on potential's actualization. The boy in him will resent her. The man in him, if he exists, will recognize her as exactly the partner worthy of his emergence. Every encounter with a high-value woman brings a man to a choice point, though he may not consciously recognize it as such. The choice is between two fundamentally different paths: retreat into the familiar or advance into transformation. Retreat looks like dismissal, devaluation, and the reassertion of control. He might tell himself she's too difficult, too demanding, not worth the effort. He might seek out women who require less of him, who confirm rather than challenge his current level of development. He might weaponize her standards as unrealistic, her boundaries as cold, her wholeness as threatening. This retreat is understandable. Growth is uncomfortable. Ego death feels like actual death. Confronting your shadow means facing everything you've spent years avoiding. For men without the resources, support, or willingness to undertake this work, retreat is the only option that preserves the current self-structure, even if that structure is fundamentally inadequate for deep relationship or mature living. The alternative is advance, and it requires courage Jung considered rare and essential. It means acknowledging that her presence has revealed your incompleteness, and instead of resenting her for it, you become curious. You ask, what is she showing me about myself? Where have I been living in fragments? What emotional capacities have I exiled? What kind of man would I need to become to match her energy, not through domination but through equivalent wholeness? This path leads to individuation, to the integration of shadow and the maturation of the anima, to relationships characterized not by need and power struggle, but by mutual sovereignty and genuine intimacy. The man who chooses this path discovers that a high-value woman isn't a threat to his masculinity, but the invitation to its fullest expression, the catalyst for becoming not what culture demands, but who he actually is, beneath all conditioning. Jung believed that relationship, particularly intimate relationship, serves as the primary arena for psychological and spiritual growth because the other person functions as a mirror, revealing what we cannot see in ourselves. But not all mirrors are created equal. Some mirrors distort, flattering our ego or confirming our biases. Some mirrors are so clouded with their own unresolved material that they reflect nothing clearly. And some mirrors, polished through the hard work of self-knowledge, reflect back our actual image with precision and compassion. A high-value woman is this latter kind of mirror. She shows a man not the fantasy version of himself he's constructed, but the actual state of his psychological and spiritual development. This is uncomfortable because most men live at a significant distance from self-knowledge. They've built elaborate defenses against seeing themselves clearly, against acknowledging their wounds, their patterns, their impact on others. They prefer the comfortable lie to the liberating truth, but discomfort is the price of consciousness, and consciousness is the foundation of genuine relationship. When a man can tolerate what the mirror shows, when he can receive feedback about his fragmentation, his shadow, his underdevelopment without immediately defending or deflecting, he's taken the first step toward transformation. The mirror isn't criticizing him. It's offering him the invaluable gift of accurate self-perception, the raw material for all growth. This is why high-value women often find themselves alone or misunderstood. They are offering medicine that tastes bitter, truth that stings before it heals. Men accustomed to mirrors that flatter rather than reflect will choose comfort over growth every time. But the man who can receive what she reflects, who can say thank you for showing me what I couldn't see, has discovered the relationship dynamic that actually transforms both people into more of who they're meant to be. What men feel when they meet a high-value woman is ultimately a call to wholeness, though it may initially register as attraction, intimidation, fascination, or resistance. At the deepest level, she's activating something in him that knows he's living below his potential, settling for fragments when integration is possible, performing masculinity when authentic selfhood is available. This knowing is buried beneath layers of conditioning, beneath years of being told that vulnerability is weakness, that emotional depth is feminine, that his worth depends on dominance and achievement rather than the quality of his consciousness. The call to wholeness says, stop performing, stop compensating, stop relating to women as objects to acquire or obstacles to overcome. Stop living in the narrow bandwidth of acceptable masculinity and discover the full spectrum of your humanity. Integrate your anima instead of projecting it. Befriend your shadow instead of denying it. Become the kind of man who doesn't need a woman to complete him, but chooses partnership from overflow rather than deficit. This is the future Jung envisioned, not a world where men and women battle for supremacy, but one where both have done the interior work necessary for actual relationship. Where women don't have to choose between power and love, don't have to shrink to be chosen, don't have to mother men who refuse to grow up, and where men don't have to perform invulnerability, don't have to compete compulsively, don't have to mistake dominance for strength. If this resonates, if you've recognized yourself in the mirror this video offered, subscribe now because we're going deeper into Jungian psychology, exploring the archetypes, shadow work, and individuation practices that transform understanding into embodiment. Your wholeness isn't something you achieve, it's what remains when you stop abandoning yourself. And the journey begins now, with the willingness to see what you've been avoiding and become who you've always been beneath the conditioning. That's where real power lives, and I'll see you there.